Hey everyone, welcome to Pop XP. And before the show starts, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And don't forget, if you can, make sure to share our stream on all your social media outlets. We appreciate it, and thanks for helping us grow the Pop XP channel. Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's the brain of the mainframe here, Nile Scala with the Pop XP, and joining me as always is Mr. Teen Sensation, Billy Tucci, and the true brain, a gemstone in the comic industry, I would say.
Thank you.
Mr. JC Vaughn. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
Good evening, gentlemen.
Doing pretty terrific. 2021 is turning out to be a pretty good year for us over here.
Indeed.
Busy as heck, and for the Pop XP, Niall, I'm loving what you're doing with all the new videos. I love the high tech. I love that we're not doing any lives right now.
Yeah, loving that, huh?
What's up with that?
I think I don't know. Maybe we'll explain it all in due time, my friends. All right. In due time.
We are in YouTube jail, but are we streaming live on Facebook?
We are live on Facebook right now.
All right. What's up, everybody out there in Facebook land? And Old Bean, good to see you. And
indeed,
Jeff, do we have? Is this one of the best shows ever right now? This is a guest we have on that when we first came up with the Pop XP, Niall, if you remember, from a year and a half ago, we did a list of the people we want. And at the top of this list was our next guest, and of course, and his compadre, who is one of our best pals at the con circuit, in which we live near each other because we'd have a lot of fun together. But you talk legend, right? You talk legend. You talk inspiration. You talk one of the main reasons why we are here right now, and that I'm in this industry and I'm not painting bridges for a living.
When you say that we stand on the shoulders of giants, this is one of the giants, man.
Absolutely.
True honor.
Well, without further ado, or don't, why don't we introduce, ladies and gentlemen out there, Mr. John Cimino, and of course, the one, the only, Mr. Roy Conan Thomas. Wait a minute. There's John.
Hey, welcome everyone.
Guys.
We don't want to. I don't want to say anything here because I like that introduction. I just wanted to hear you guys go on talking, legends and giants and things. You go ahead for another hour, and we'll just sit here and watch. This is fine.
We could do that. Right? I'm sure we can do it. Another 10 minutes or so.
All right, everyone go around and say one nice thing about Roy.
We have to limit it to one.
Say something nice about Roy.
It's not necessary.
Well, it is great to have you guys on. This is wonderful. This really is, especially for someone like me. We grew up as comic fans, and now we get a chance to talk to our heroes. And this is one of the rare cases where where it is good to meet one of your heroes. They say never meet your heroes unless your hero's name is Roy Thomas. So, hey, Roland, good to see you.
What the heck? Holy cow, Roy, the boy's fantastic.
Well, thank you for everything. I don't know, I'm not used to this. I'm in my own home, so I'm obviously not used to hearing nice things said about me. Because it's just my life at the year.
Right.
Said something nice. So
are you in the same scenario where, say, you go away to a convention and people call you Sir and Mr. Thomas, and then you get home and then Monday night your wife is yelling at you to take the garbage out?
On a good night, that's what she's yelling. Yeah, it's that's the way it goes. I don't feel like I deserve the garbage thing all the time. I certainly don't deserve the hero thing. I think what I am is one of the last survivors of a certain period now. It's amazing to me because, of course, when I got in the field, they were all my heroes, and so forth. I mean, I didn't think of their hero exactly, but the people I looked up to, whose work I wanted to see, the Jack Kirbys and the Kuberts and the Vermitas and Everetts and Stanleys and people like that. So now, of course, most of these people have passed from the scene and so forth, and I suddenly look around and find that of the people who were there even after I came for the first few years, through most of the 60s at least, of the Marvel bullpen, there's almost John Romita and I are about the only people left who worked in the office, who are around every day or even a number of days and so forth. And it's kind of strange, suddenly I'm having the same feeling that maybe other people had, at other times. But I'm glad to still be around to be especially when I consider the alternative to being around to talk about these things and to maybe I don't know, throw a little light or a little darkness or something on the subject of the Marvel bullpen, or what was Mort Weisinger really like, or all sorts of death-defying questions.
Roy, what's cool though is Roy was so young when he got to Marvel.
Well, that's a matter of opinion. I thought I was young. I was 24 when I got in the field. A couple of months before that, I had lunch, skipped high school, and to have a pizza in the middle of the afternoon with Wendell Crowley, who was passing through town. He had been the editor from 1944 till the end of the Fawcett days of Captain Marvel and the Marvel family and all those great books. And when he found out I was about to go into the field at the age of 24, he says, "You're an old man getting there. We were all teenagers." So it's really just a matter of perspective.
Roy, I had a question.
And of course, Stan was 18 and he was running the company. So who knows?
I had a question for you, Roy. When you were, as a fan, you were really excited about a particular comic or publisher or something like that. Are there any of those that still you look at it now and you go, I know exactly what I was thinking. I just still love that stuff.
I want to make sure I get the question. Are you talking about things that I liked then?
Yes.
Or what?
Yes, things that you liked when you were a fan.
You mean, I still kind of like this. I mean, I still kind of like the stuff I liked then. My wife always says I never throw anything away. And one of the things I don't usually throw away, I add to my likes, but and a little bit I throw away. I suddenly see a movie or something, a movie or hear a record that I thought was really great sometime. And once in a while I decide, well, I was really wrong on that. But 80-90% of the time, I sort of like what I used to like, and I just try to add to it. My favorite comic book, in spite of all the other things and knowing all the other wonderful things that come out, my favorite comic book is still All-Star Comics from the 1940s. Mm-hmm. My favorite Marvel character is still The Thing, who has been ever since the first day I saw him in early August of 1961. And but at the same time, you add things onto that. But I still like the stuff I liked then. I look at it with a different perspective, obviously. A lot of the stuff I saw when I was 5 years old or 10 years old, and now I have a different perspective on it. But I can still see what I have to do is mentally go in there and sort of become 5 or 10 again and see what I saw in it.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't written for an 80-year-old. It wasn't written even for a 20-year-old or a 15-year-old. So you have to kind of get inside, what something is aimed at, whether it's a movie or a comic book or whatever. If you try to judge it on other standards, there's no way to judge popular culture on any other standard, I don't think.
Now, Roy, let me ask you a question, because since you're kind of bringing up, what you were into growing up with comics and everything, as a kid reading comics, becoming a fan, and pursuing that as a career, your first day over at Marvel, or first day into your first weeks, maybe even into your first months, was it everything you dreamt it to be, or did you actually be like, ooh, what did I get myself into?
Well, I hadn't dreamt of Marvel at all. I had dreamt of DC, I loved the Marvel comics. I got to the point where I realized that what Stan was doing with Jack and Ditko was the best comics going. I had no doubt about that by then. But I still liked a lot of the characters and concepts that DC is much or better, because this is the new version of Green Lantern, the new version of Hawkman, etc. Mm-hmm. And I had excellent relations with those people. But so I didn't have a lot of expectations until the day I went to work for them. I never had any thought about working for Marvel Comics. I had thoughts for several months at least, and off and on for a year or two, since I was corresponding with Julie Schwartz, of at least the idea of maybe writing a script or two. I did have some thoughts about doing some work sometime for DC Comics, and as unlikely as even that seemed. But working for Marvel, the first time I ever thought about it for even a second was when I was talking to Stan on the phone on the Monday of the week Tuesday, because the Monday had been a holiday. The Tuesday of the week I went to work with him, and he was talking to me about this writer's test. Well, that's sort of like a job interview, and although I wasn't looking for a job, I was going to take it. But I still wasn't really thinking about working for Marvel, even when I took the test and this and that, and I did it. because I had a job and I wasn't planning on quitting it. But the job I had kept getting worse, so that by the timing was just perfect. If you were drawing a chart, the DC line would have been going down, down, down every day. I intermeshed with Mort Weisinger, my boss, and every day that I didn't meet Stan Lee, it went up simply because he was an unknown. Then all of a sudden, when I met him, and he was a very personable guy, and he seemed to like me, and all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I really seriously considered I could act. And so when Stan, about 15 minutes after we met, asked me, "What do we have to do to hire you away from National?" as they called DC, I said, "Yeah, just offer me a job. I'm yours."
Just pay me well.
Yeah. But during that period after that, which is what you were really talking about, it worked out. It worked out pretty well. I mean, I loved it. I mean, I had a weird situation outside work. I was sleeping on the mattress on the floor of a guy, Dave Kaler, in the Lower East Side. They call it the East Village, but it was the Lower East Side. It was a slum. And, I didn't have a desk or anything like that, and so forth. But when I'd come into work at the office, it was exciting. Stan Lee was there, and people were coming in. Jack Kirby was coming in, and this artist or that artist was coming in, and Stan was showing me what was happening. I was seeing this wonderful artwork pass through in pencil form and ink, and getting lessons from Stan on why he proofread a story, why he had some art changed from the pencil, or why he was even changing it after it was inked, and just seeing all this stuff. And I guess the first real bump was a week or two later. The guy who had come into work and got a job as an editorial assistant type right before me, about 2 weeks before me, was Steve Skates. You know that name, of course, from writing Aquaman later and various other things. Good writer. Well, he had got a job a couple of weeks before. Somehow, I don't know, he seemed to have no feeling for proofreading or anything, and Stan needed a proofreader, among other things. Even though the official job was staff writer, he wanted somebody to proofread. Steve seemed to have no idea, in spite of loving comics, how to proofread a comic book. So Stan had to give up on him, and Steve just sort of wandered around without much anything to do. But Stan gave him a Western to write, and Two Gun Kid or something. And he came to me for a little bit of help, and so forth. And I just talked it over. I didn't write anything, but we talked over a few ideas, and he had the thing done, and he had it written. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, he started out with a couple of the villains coming through a door and jamming into each other in the door. Well, that's not the way Stan Lee thought a Western story should start, with a couple of villains that don't look like that much, And so anyway, so he has me and Steve in his office, and he's going over why this story that by now has been penciled and written because Stan didn't have time to look at it before, why it's so awful. He's going into this and that. And I made the mistake at some point of moderately, politely trying to defend something that Steve had done, not even anything I was involved in. And Stan just looked at me and said, "The less we hear from you at this point, the better." That was like the first little blip, But so I just shut up and said nothing because it wasn't really my story anyway, and I felt like I'm not going to do Steve or myself any good by saying anything more. So, but those were hiccups that you have with any jobs, and Stan forgave me, and if you'd asked him a couple of days later, he would never have remembered it even happened. I've remembered it now for 55 years, but Stan forgot it 2 minutes later.
Oh wow!
Now, so this is an interesting story. Is that you are one of the first you are amongst the first generation of writers and artists that came into comics because you were fans, right? I mean, that generation before you was more of a job for them, but you were a comic fan.
You were the first fan.
Yeah. There were a couple of people who had sort of been fans there were some people that had been comics fans in the 40s, and then they got in, a lot of that. But of course, there hadn't been any people coming into the field much for years and years. The only people who had come in before me, not counting Steve Skates by 2 weeks, was Archie Goodwin a year or so before, who was a fan, but of course he was trying to be a professional artist. He wasn't just coming in from fandom, although he'd been part of EC fandom. He had become, of course, the editor of Creepy and Eerie, and really, working at a high level, even if it was a small company. And the other was the person that I was really going to take the job of at DC Comics and did for 4 days, Nelson Bridwell, who was about 8 or 10 years older than me, but was a real fan. I mean, you look up the word fan in the dictionary, Nelson's picture is right there. But we were a relatively new breed, people coming in, not because we wanted to later write the great American novel, or some of us maybe wanted to, not because we were looking to get a newspaper strip out of it, and not because we were desperate and couldn't figure out anything else to do, but just because working in the comic industry just seemed to me and to a lot of us over those years just the greatest job you could have, unless you were trying to make $1 million. We had to work and get rich in it. But other than that, it was really pretty much our ideal job. It was what we wanted to do. We saw no shame in it. We weren't going to go to parties and tell them I'm in publishing, like Stan did and all these other guys did back in the 50s and so forth. We were going to tell them, we write comic books. We draw comic books. We're proud of it. We may be stupid, but we're proud of it.
I'm going to be Roy's self-promoter here. That's what I do. But Roy.
I've been wondering about that.
Yeah. Roy was the first true fanboy that got into the business and actually brought that enthusiasm to his writing, to the literature, that he made comics a lot more deeper than they were. And then he brought he doesn't like to hear this, but that enthusiasm. He was the first guy doing that.
Well, Archie was a really bright guy,
But who won all the awards, Roy?
Archie won a lot of awards.
In the 70s, nobody won more writing awards than him. What was it? 6, 7, 8? How many, Roy? 2.
Anyway, so now you see why he gets 10% of everything, which is very little.
And speaking of the bullpen, today is John Romita's 91st birthday.
Was it today or yesterday?
I think it's today, isn't it?
Is it? He always seems like, I can't imagine John at 90, 91. Yeah, I haven't talked to him in some time. We email once in a while, a couple of lines.
Well, I got another question, then I'll shut up because I just want to listen. But working in the bullpen, did you know John Tartaglione?
Well, only in
he
the
was,
sense
he was
that
an art director,
he was an
though.
artist.
So I don't know how much. Yeah, I don't know how much interaction you had with him, but he was an art director.
Not at Marvel.
Yeah,
maybe later.
He was an inker.
When I met him, he was. When I knew him, all he was, and I'm not denigrating that, I'm just meant he had no other function at Marvel. He was the inker of Sergeant Fury.
Oh, okay.
Later, he worked in the office. I remember he and Flo shared some space, and he became kind of a proofreader even, like Flo was, and he sort of had a more, I don't know what kind of thing, but it was really a production, and he handles various things of production. But when I knew him, he was merely again, I don't merely sounds denigrating, and I didn't mean to do that, but he was the inker of Sergeant Fury. He was somebody I met in passing. He came in and he, dropped off. No, that was Jack Abel. But anyway, I mean that worked with Flo.
Yeah.
But Jack Tartaglione, I know of nothing of him except as an inker. Really, he never had any. He never worked in the office unless maybe he was finishing up a page or two.
Oh, I thought he did. Oh, my mistake.
And later I guess he inked the Spider-Man script for a while. But,
he was my my mentor.
Yeah, but he never had any kind of office job in there.
Oh, okay. I thought he did.
Oh, yeah. I liked his inking, and he seemed like a nice enough guy, but I never really knew him well. He would just sort of come in and drop off his pages, and we exchanged a few words, and we never had that much contact.
No.
Who were the real
Abel for a second, with whom I also didn't have a lot of time.
Who were the real characters in the Marvel bullpen?
The real characters. Okay, no, not me, not Rascally Roy. I was not rascally at all. I was more rascally when I was a rock and roll singer than I was in the comic. I was so serious. Robin Green, who succeeded Flo as the Girl Friday secretary type of stands. She mentioned too that I was, very serious. I was just in there working, and I didn't crack a lot of jokes, and I wasn't doing anything. The people who were characters, besides Stan, of course, who was always on.
Wait, Roy, let me interject for a second. See, the thing is, Roy looks at it from the inside. you got to look at it from the outside. Roy and Stan were characters. It's hilarious. And there's a reason why they got along so well, because they both have that. They don't know it. Well, Stan knew it, but Roy, they got that they're both characters. They're like almost like the characters they make on paper. And it's hilarious. He doesn't think so, but he's hilarious. Wait, what am I going to say?
Well, but one of the funniest characters I used to like, he was a freelancer at first, got a staff job soon after, was Mori Kuramoto, the Japanese American guy. Mori, it was a wonderful guy. He sort of took me under his wing for a while. He took me out. I almost never had Chinese food. He took me to Chinese or Japanese food places, and would talk to me about a lot of stuff. And it was really nice, because otherwise, I liked the people in the Marvel office, but I didn't. And Saul Brodsky and I, very soon, the production manager, who of course was also a good artist, we used to go out to lunch, several days a week at least, and everything. We just got along, and so we would do that. If he didn't have something else doing, or if I didn't, we usually had lunch together. But but I never saw any of these people outside work. It's not like I didn't want to, or I was avoiding them. They were, first of all, most of them were middle-aged men, right? I was 24. They were all, 40, 50. Stan was in his early 40s. Brodsky was that age. Maury was older too, for that matter. And who else? When John Romita came in a couple of weeks later, he was about 11 years older. If he's 91 today, then he was almost 11 years older than me. Marie Severin was some years older than me. She was around as production, person. Steve Skates was the same age, but he was gone in just a few weeks. I guess that Western really didn't work out for him. But luckily, he got other work at Charlton, DC. Yeah.
Roy, give me.
So Billy, you interrupted him answering my question so you could forget a question?
I know, I got it. For those because we jump right into you getting at Marvel. For those that don't know, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood? Where'd you grow up? How did you make your way to New York City and Marvel Comics?
Oh boy. Yeah, I grew up in a little town of Jackson, Missouri, which had 4,000 or 5,000 people in it, and it's about 10 or 15 miles away from the Mississippi, about 100 miles south of St. Louis. So St. Louis was the big city, and I got there maybe once or twice a year to go to the zoo or something. But obviously in an environment like that, unless you have an overwhelming amount of ambition, you just figure you're never going to amount to much. You're just going to, in my case, I was going to become a teacher. I got nothing against teachers, but I wasn't looking to set the world on fire, or I wasn't thinking I'll get a teaching job and then I'll write some wonderful things. No, I figured I'd just get a teacher and I'll watch movies and listen to records and read comic books and whatever else I do. So I never had any ambition at all. I just grew up loving comic books and movies and all the usual crap that everybody likes, and so forth in pop culture. I was, a teenager when rock and roll hit, and everything. Bill Haley, the Comets, and Elvis, and that kind of thing. And that James Dean, huge deal. And so I just grew up having a small town life and wondering about the big city, which of course to me at that stage was St. Louis, where I ended up teaching right on the outskirts of St. Louis for 3 of the 4 years I taught. And but I never thought about moving. I had been to New York for a day or two on the senior trip, a couple of weeks after we graduated, and I thought, boy, it's kind of an interesting place. I actually wandered around by myself. I wasn't that much of a a loner really, but where some of these people were going off in 2s or 3s or 12s, I kind of stayed by myself, and I went down to Times Square and I wandered around and looked in the windows and said, gee, this is very strange. Everybody's going out of business. They're all going out of business sales, last days of sale. Every sign said at every store, better rush in and grab those Statue of Liberty real fast or they'll all be gone. And but I never thought about living there. It would have scared the bejesus out of me to think about moving to New York. But then, of course, I began to get interested. I never lost my interest in comics, but they kind of lost their interest in me for a number of years because they abandoned the superhero. I didn't like horror comics, but at least they were something weird. And of course, they went away too. So, but I still read, a few comics here and there. And then all of a sudden one day I discovered, when I was 15 years old, I discovered a new version of The Flash. I go in to buy some fireworks for the 4th of July, and there's a new version of The Flash there, looking like he stole Captain Marvel's costume off his clothesline and so forth. And then over the next few years, Green Lantern, Justice League, and then Fantastic Four was sort of a revelation because that was so different. But I never thought about getting into the field. I sort of liked the idea, but I'm down here in, small town Missouri, or at least on the edge of St. Louis, and I'm not going to. And I just and I enjoyed my little correspondence with Julius Schwartz, the editor of Flash, Justice League, and all that. Exchanged, I think, 2 letters or something with Stan. I never had any kind of relationship with him. He knew who I was vaguely, and then I started doing the Alter Ego magazine, which I inherited from the person who inherited it from the real creator of it, Jerry Bales. But again, not with the idea of using it as an entree into the comics field. I just did it because I hated teaching so much. I hated teaching high school so much, but I had no other skills. If I didn't teach English or history or something like that, what was I going to do? It'd be a store clerk or whatever, something I would hate even worse. So what I decided to do was to stay the teacher, because that was my life. That was my lot. And I would just shamelessly shortchange the kids, the school board, the parents, and everybody else by doing as little work as I humanly could. I mean, I graded papers and I did what little I could and avoided any bit of extra work I could. And I spent all my time on the fan magazines. When I took over Alter Ego, I justified each line with a typewriter, counting out letters. I pasted down the pages. Other people would draw some pictures, but the whole idea was to lose myself in that and not have to think about this teaching job I had to get up tomorrow and do, which I really didn't like much. But somehow that came to the attention of the editors. And
while he was losing himself in that, Jerry Bales and Billy Joe White basically started comic fandom by accident.
Yeah, well, mostly Jerry. I was just a helper. That's the interesting thing. In most of the things in my life, the 2 or 3 biggest things that I got involved in, I've always been Robin. I'm never Batman. I was Robin. First Jerry Bales, this 7 or 8 years older than me, college professor. I meet him, and suddenly a couple of weeks later, he's going to start this magazine called Alter Ego. It took over the 2 or 3 month period. And will I help him by contributing about half the issue? And then he names me co-editor, but I didn't edit anything, So again, it was just like I was just, the Robin to his start, his Batman, his starting the whole thing. And I inherited the magazine after somebody else had it in between, but it hadn't been my desire to publish a fanzine. I didn't even want to. When Jerry gave it up, he gave it to somebody else because he rightly assumed that I wouldn't even want to edit a fanzine, that I wasn't the type of person to want to do all that work. And I didn't think I was. But by the time I got it, I was so unhappy as a teacher that I was very happy to do anything that took me away from that world for a while. And then who did I do? I drifted, instead of drifting into a competitive outfit like DC Comics. I drift in, but I drift out right away. And what do? I become the second banana to the biggest, not necessarily the most talented, but one of the most talented, but one of the biggest stars in the comics field already by then, even if it was a tiny world, which is Stan Lee. And I'm, in addition to associating with the great artists and everything. So, and I've always been satisfied because, to be the number 2 guy is not a bad deal. You get a lot of fun and you don't have quite as much responsibility. And I was happy with that. I was never expecting Stan Lee to suddenly become the publisher of Marvel Comics, and to say I would be, first story editor, but within a few weeks, editor-in-chief. It had never occurred to me at the age of, what was I then? I was 31. I figured, at some stage at the age of 60, I would retire, from being the associate editor of Marvel Comics, and Stan Lee, who would then be about, 80 something, when he retired or something. But I was absolutely floored when I suddenly discovered, that I was going to be more than the associate editor. I didn't think that hard about leaving and trying to look for something better, even though I had job offers from DC Atlas and a couple of places here and there. All I wanted to do was just be the second banana at Marvel, and that was just fine with me.
Mm-hmm. And we got a couple questions in the chat here. Let's start off with William. William Pace says, "What's Roy's favorite character he created?"
That's an excellent question.
Favorite character I created. Well, as far as fame, because you like to be identified with the most famous character you created. And even though I wasn't the sole creator of this character, I suppose Wolverine has to have a special place, just because even though it was just a throwaway idea to me and Len Wein and others did all the heavy lifting, it was still my concept. So that's kind of nice. As far as characters that I made up, otherwise I liked, I always had a real soft spot for the Vision.
Yeah.
I suppose Ultron, and Ultron, he's a villain. He's just, but I don't know. The funny thing is, I always preferred writing the characters I didn't make up. I preferred writing Conan to Red Sonja. I preferred writing the Thing to the Vision. These were the characters I admired, and I wanted to write them. If I made up somebody, I don't think I had quite the same respect for a character I made up as one that Jack Kirby and Stan Lee made up. See?
Wow.
Well, I'm not saying they weren't good characters, but they were second-tier characters compared to Wolverine. Maybe became better, but again, that's a lot of other people doing it. I never wrote Wolverine until years and years later.
That's totally understandable. I totally understand that feeling. If particularly for the ones that influenced us so much, it's there. You have to be on your guard to do your best with those characters in a way that there's nobody grading you if you get it wrong with your own character.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you never met Stan Lee. Maybe you did. But...
Yeah, I did, but literally the only dialogue I did that Stan ever approved was for Stan appearing in my comic strip.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. But no, Stan was actually pretty encouraging. He was a very positive boy, but he he'd want to correct you, but he wasn't looking to put you down. I never saw him, do something like a Bob Kanigher or a Mort Weisinger would have, with the idea of just putting somebody down or putting them in their place, or or to denigrate them in any way. I never saw him do that at all. He treated people generally with respect. Even sometime when I think probably when he didn't necessarily feel that much, I never saw him treat people with disrespect. Now, maybe he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and I can understand that because, when there's only so much credit in the world, and Stan was going to get a fair share of it, and I can see why people would get upset. But for somebody who wants to be a second banana, I wasn't too worried, about that. I mean, second bananas, they're just lucky to get the peeling,
And James Sanchez asks, who had the bigger hand in creating the Vision, you or John? My favorite character of all time.
Wow.
Stanley and Jack Kirby had a lot before we came on. Jack Kirby and maybe Joe Simon was involved. It wasn't signed, but they had, of course, created the original Vision and the name and the general look, although we changed it somewhat. So that was an influence. What had happened is that Stan wanted a new Avenger. I had been always wanting to bring in some Avengers. He said, it's time to do a new Avenger. And I said, why don't we bring in the Vision? I like the look of that character. I was going to bring him in from this smoke dimension where he lived and have him trapped in the Avengers. I guess a little like Silver Surfer was trapped on Earth or something. And Stan said, nah, the Vision, he was never that much of a character. He remembered him vaguely. Says, that's not much of a, he didn't like the name either. Vision is a fairly weak name compared to the kind of smash names like Iron Man that Stan liked. And he said, make the guy an android. So, when you tell somebody make up a character and make him an android, right away you're partly creating the character, aren't you? So really, I had a lot of the work done for me in a sense, the same way maybe Len Wein did with Wolverine, which is that an android, but that was all. I could make it any android I want. I think Stan wanted a male android or something, but that's about it. But I said, any other instructions? No, just make it an android. Didn't say why, nothing about to explore the human condition or any junk like that. So I said, well, if Stan's going to leave it in my hands, I'll take an android and I'll make him the Vision. So I did sort of an end run around Stan, knowing that he might say, since he had said he wasn't that wild, but that character, he might object, but he never said anything about it and everything. So then I went out and I sent John Buscema a picture of the Vision as he had looked, that very first panel, wonderful panel drawn by Jack. And I suggested some changes. And I said, for one thing, he's got to have a chest symbol. Put a diamond on there. So he was going to either be able to walk through walls or be hard as diamond. So put a diamond. I swiped that from Spy Smasher, the old Fawcett comics. Sure. And we changed the coloring. And, he doesn't have a totally bald head. He's got a little bit of a helmet. And John, I think, added that thing that became the gem later, that little jewel there. I think he just added that as a design element. It became more important later on. So the character was mostly my idea, and John was really just taking Kirby's drawing and that costume and adapting it a long ways. I told him. So really, I'm very happy that John and I are counted as the creators of the Vision, and to a certain extent we deserve that. But there's the shadow of a couple of guys named Kirby and Lee there in front of us and everything. And in a way, it was, again, just another committee thing. Nobody creates anything in a vacuum. And certainly the Vision. The only argument Stan and I ever had about it was right after the first story came out, a little thing called Avengers number 57 that seems to get reprinted every couple of weeks. But anyway, and Stan looked at it and he said to me, he says, "Why did you have him color him red?" He says, "Well," I said, "we have blue people swimming under the water. We have a green Hulk. If you color him white, the paper that we print on is so thin you can see the other side. So there aren't that many colors left. So I just thought we'll make him red." And Stan said, "Well, people aren't going to like that. They're not going to like this android who's got red skin." I said, "Well, you once told me that Martin Goodman told you people weren't going to like a Spider-Man either." Well, I wasn't going with that, but I did say that to him. And so later on, the character became probably the most popular character for a number of years that Marvel had that wasn't in his own comic. And I never tried. I always held back, and I guess if I'd been asked to, but I deliberately never tried to make him a solo character because I wanted to keep him in the group. Yeah. I wasn't interested in either writing. I wasn't interested in writing a Vision comic, and I would have lost interest in him if somebody else had written, the Vision in another comic. Then I wouldn't have felt like he was mine in Avengers anymore, and I'd have probably written him out. The same way that I stopped writing the Fantastic Four about the time they started the Marvel 2-in-1 comic that had the Thing in a team-up situation. All of a sudden, Thing wasn't my character anymore. I had to coordinate it with another writer, and I just dropped the Fantastic Four. By that stage, I was trying to make my own little world and not have to interact with too many other people. Now, does that answer the question? That's just about 12 questions. I don't know if there were ones you asked.
I think that answers this question there. Now, I have a question from you answering that question is with Stan Lee. You said, we were talking about the Vision and everything. He's like, okay, it is, but make him an android. Now, documentaries and things I've seen of him, he always came off like he would just have an idea and spit it out right away. Was that truly the case, or was that something he sat on for a while and then came to you one day and said, no, make him an android? Or was it right in that conversation, he's just like, make him an android, see you later?
I don't know because he didn't tell me, but the fact that he mentioned it the way he did makes me think he must have had it in the back of his mind, because otherwise I can't think that he just thought of it at that particular moment. And yet he didn't come to me and say, I want you to introduce an android into the Avengers. He did it. He finally agreed with me. I said, it's time to get another member of the Avengers. And I said, fine. And then he asked for my idea, and he blew up the Vision when I said he blew him off. So maybe he came up with it then, and maybe it's been stirring around his mind. He had a very quick mind. And by this time, he was like 45 to 48 or something years old, pushing 50. And just about 50. And he'd been around, he'd written a lot of scripts, he'd seen a lot of scripts, he had a lot of success in the comics field and everything. I think that his mind was just attuned to a lot of things, and it was even though he wasn't a comics fan in the same sense I was, never was. He grew up before there were comic books, really. And as a kid, he wouldn't have been able to read many comic books, if any. And so we didn't really have that much in common. But he'd seen so much that he just had a lot at his disposal. He wasn't the creative genius in the same way that maybe a Jack Kirby was. I've sort of come to see that over the years. Jack Kirby was a whole different kind of creative genius, and so forth. Maybe, I don't know, you could certainly make an argument that he's up there with the top couple that the field has produced. Stan's talents were of a somewhat different kind and everything. If they add up to a genius, it's a genius of, hard work and things like that. But, on the other hand, Jack Kirby, genius he was, would never have created Marvel Comics. I'm absolutely convinced there would be no Marvel Comics if Jack Kirby had been in charge, because Jack didn't think in terms of universes or melding things, and Stan, did. Right. Even when Jack would have drawn 5 books, he wouldn't have, he wouldn't have really brought them together in any major way like Stan did, I don't think. And Stan wasn't thinking of it either, but he just had good instincts. And of course, what a wonderful team they were, right? I mean, they reshaped comics, and comics are still living off that now. 50, 60 years later, they're still living off that, in spite of a lot of things that have gone beyond and make some of what Jack did and maybe more of what Stan did look a little primitive. But at the same time, they are still two of the people that are two of the most important people in the history of comics, certainly in the history of comics after that first golden age start. Of course, Kirby has the additional fact he was important in both of those 2 ages. He was important in the golden age. He was important in the silver age. Stan was just a functionary in the silver age. He had to wait for a while. He had to wait to the age of about 38 or so before he suddenly came out. Right. And he probably couldn't have done it without Jack, but I don't think Jack would have ever done it without Stan either. Yeah. They just needed each other. It
is absolutely.
They didn't know it, but they needed it.
It's one of those things where the total is greater than the sum of the parts. Yeah, there's no question that both of those guys did incredible and fascinating work without each other, but it doesn't exist on the sustained greatness of what they did together. Sometimes despite each other, and sometimes in a complementary.
Jack had a longer creative life.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's right.
Jack had a longer creative life because here we're talking about a guy who, from about 1940 and 41, was suddenly a major creator in the field. The DC wanted him and this and that, all the way through till at least the 70s or 80s. Jack was a force in the field. Stan, although he was an important editor and everything like that, and was no kind of creative force in the field until he was like 38 years old. And he did all of his really almost all his important work in a period of 10 years or less. But what's the difference? When you're great, you're great. Some people are great for 50 years. Some people are great for 15 minutes.
Yeah, you look at.
But in the end, they both created something wonderful, separately and together.
You look at Sandy Koufax. It's a very. I'm
compressed, just proud to be a little part of it.
Yeah, it was just a very compressed timeline. Stan seemed to maintain his ability to problem solve in stories for a very long time in collaborating with other people. I had a friend who was a assistant editor or associate editor at Marvel in the 90s, and Stan would throw out a story idea. They'd say, there's this problem with that, and he'd just roll into the next thing. And they were impressed as young people. They were still impressed that he was still vital at that kind of thing later on.
Yeah, he had a sharp mind. He was not somebody who just put a couple of words in the mouth of Kirby characters. Anybody who thinks that is either lying or an idiot.
So
maybe
I have a fanboy question that I want to ask Roy, and that is, do you have, out of your stories, do you have a favorite?
Excellent question, Wolverine.
I don't know if I really have a favorite. I mean, I'm real proud of I'm kind of proud of those two Vision stories with all the things that I look at and see I could have done better. Those first two Vision stories with the Vision and Ultron, I'm kind of pleased with the general thrust, even if not with the actual dialogue. The Kree Skrull War, but there, of course, it's because of Neil Adams coming along and helped me ramp it up. You know, I don't think it would have been, it would have existed without him, but it wouldn't have been, you know, half as good without him. And I don't know, a few Conan stories here and there. There, of course, I was doing a lot of adaptation, but some of the original stories, certain stories I wrote, it's hard for me to pick any one story. I know one of the stories I was probably the proudest of near the end of the run was when I did a story which divided time between Conan and Robert E. Howard, and was sort of a fictional version of how
the Saboteur.
Robert E. Howard might have created Conan or something. And
the Saboteur to Conan one, right? It was in Saboteur.
Yeah, Savage. It was number 200 or something. I don't know what it was. Anyway,
that's great stuff.
But I don't think I have a real favorite story. No.
Mm-hmm. I had a conversation with
some you like better than others.
I had a conversation with Paul Levitz, and I asked him what Marvel character or characters would he have liked to have written. And I thought for sure, given how insightful about personalities that some of his scripts are, that I thought he'd say something like Spider-Man. And he immediately, I mean, without any hesitation, said Avengers. And I said, really? Why? He said, because I learned to write team books from Roy's Avengers. And I thought, considering how great he did on Legion of Superheroes, that was a pretty cool compliment.
That's what he tells me. He says he claimed he sort of reverse engineered my stories. I said, well, gee, I wish you'd have told me. I never knew what I was doing. You know, I wish
back royalties coming to you.
Yeah, if I was doing anything, I was trying to reverse engineer stories by Stan, and maybe not doing that good a job at it because I didn't really, I mean, Stan, I could write kind of like Stan, but I didn't really think the same way he did. I didn't have as agile a mind, but I also just didn't think in quite the same terms. He always thought in terms of the big action and so forth, and sometimes I would try to go for slightly subtler things or whatever, but not necessarily make them, just go for them. But, I've always been very pleased that I was any influence on a couple of people, including Paul, who, of course, was such a successful writer in his own right.
And Jeff Johns seems to write a lot like your stuff, too.
Well, thank God he put food on my table by using 4 or 5 characters of mine and Stargirl and everything, making kind of interesting. It gave me a reason to watch a WB TV show, which I hadn't done really before. So, but it's kind of a fun little show.
Speaking of
I enjoyed it. I wish I got a credit on it.
Speaking of TV shows, Roy, where did your germ of the idea for What If come from?
Well, not from a TV show. You're saying that because it's going to be a TV show?
Because it's going to be a TV show, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty simple. When I quit being editor-in-chief in 1974, I needed some other assignments. I was doing a couple of Conan books, but my whole desire, once I stepped away, is I wasn't going to work under Marv or Len or anybody else. My deal with Stan is I'll stay. I won't go looking for a job at DC. I had an offer, but I said, only if I can be, my own writer and editor. I'm not going to work under Marv or Len. I respect them. I like them, but I won't work under them now. I said, I have to report directly to you, and you're the only person that can change any of the dialogue. I get to do the covers, choose the artists, etc. And reluctantly, because he saw there was, just confused things. So then once I got that out of him, I had to find some other things to do that would keep me away from having to ask, what is Spider-Man doing this month? Which is great. I'd been handling that kind of thing for about a decade by that point, 9 years anyway. I didn't want to do it anymore. So I didn't want to have to check with somebody what the Thing was doing or Spider-Man or whatever. I wanted stuff that was sort of mine, the way Conan was mine. Conan gave me a feeling of power. I could sort of do whatever I wanted with Conan. Stan didn't know what the hell Conan was about. He had no understanding for it at all. He kind of thought it looked nice and so forth, and he let me alone because the sales were good. And so I made up a couple of series very quickly in order to do that. The first one was the Invaders.
Yeah, man.
Because I thought, well, I like the idea of writing Captain America, the Human Torch, and Submariner, but if I write them in World War II, I don't have to coordinate with anybody, and everything. I can just write them. And so I sold that to Stan by calling it the Invaders, a name he had wanted to call a comic once and had forgotten about. And he said, I like that title, he said. He forgot it was his. And then I made up What If, which, of course, is also his title in a way. I mean, he hadn't thought of it as a title, but he was always using that expression in story conferences with me, with artists. He'd say, well, what if this and what if that and so forth. And he's not the only person who did it. What if is a common expression. Everybody does it. And Stan used it as much as most. So I thought, well, let's take What If. I said, I sort of always liked the idea of those imaginary stories and some of the weird things you could do at DC. Like what if Superman and Lois Lane got married, or what if this and what if that. And if it was a dream or an imaginary story, you could do it. But I didn't want to do a dream or an imaginary story. I wanted it real. And of course, I like the parallel worlds thing that Julie Schwartz and Gardner Fox had pioneered. So I sort of made it like it's another dimension. And it was, it's the watcher looking into all these dimensions and seeing these alternatives and so forth. And I thought, boy, if nothing else, I'll know what kind of story, because every month I'll go to some classic story and I'll do my own take on it with a different ending and this and that. And I very quickly, after a few issues, decided I didn't want to do that on a regular basis, and I found other things to do. But in the meantime, I started what became a fairly successful comic, and has been around through 2 or 3 incarnations now at Marvel, and is now suddenly a TV show. And it was really just because I wanted to not have to find out what Spider-Man was doing this month.
That's great.
It was just about self-protection.
I always loved how you handled in the first issue, how you handled the Spider-Man Superman crossover, and that very obliquely. I always thought that was.
Well, I couldn't show it. I couldn't
right,
show
of
it,
course.
so all I could show was the fist.
Yeah, but I thought it was great because it was a different angle on a very iconic panel. That I always loved that. I remember the first time I read it, and it stuck with me, and I think it did with a lot of other guys. It may be something that doesn't sustain itself as an ongoing series, but the concept is still so strong.
Yeah, it's going to be weird because every week you're going to have different characters on it, and not all the characters are going to be equally popular, and there's nothing to bring a person back from one show to the next, generally speaking. So we'll just have to see. I think it's an interesting idea for a series, whether it'll sustain itself. But if they do a lot of good stories, and of course, if they don't have Spider-Man one week, they can have the Thing, and they can have the Hulk, and you've got a lot of good characters to go back and forth between.
Yeah.
But then, as you say, it's an odd thing, and it's just a matter of whether people will glom onto it or not.
Mm-hmm. And then we got a question here from Oliver Villar, who says, what was it like working on the Avengers crossover Operation Galactic Storm in 1992?
I knew you worked on that.
Not that interesting. No, but basically, the only thing interesting to me was it was almost the only time during that return to Marvel, like in the 90s, that I did from the late 80s through most of the 90s, for about a decade there. It was one of the few times that I was ever really involved with, other people much at Marvel besides my immediate editor, since I was living out in Los Angeles and almost never came up to the office. And this is a case where they had us come back, and we all went off in a bus or something up to some retreat out in some place in Connecticut or wherever they held for the whole day and so forth. And it was sort of interesting. Because, I guess somebody, I don't know, was it Mark Grunwald or someone, had the basic idea, and then the rest of us were kind of filling in the cracks and so forth. But the funny thing is, the only thing from that whole conference, the only thing I ever remember was a bunch of people sitting around complaining about Les Daniels' book. What was that name of his book? It was the first big book about Marvel history, remember? And they were all complaining because he hadn't had enough. I guess nobody had watched what he was going to write, so he wrote stuff. And of course, I was thrilled because he wrote it there about how Marv and I were so discontented with the Jim Shooter era, and things like this. And had Marvel been paying attention, they would have never let that get out in an official book. It will never happen again. By the time Les went a couple of years later, wrote a DC book, Jeanette Kahn took over, and as Jerry Conway, my writing partner and fine writer, used to say, "God protect me from ever having any project in which Jeanette Kahn takes a personal interest." Anyway, the thing is that, and she watched over that she's a nice person, but she would watch over that thing. And so you're not going to get a breath of anything interesting or anything lively happen. It's only going to be the positive side. Of course, that's the way Marvel has been since then too. You know, you don't get very interesting histories if they're the house histories. You know, those are the boring ones. Those are the ones that are full of stories that, you know, good stories, but you don't really get the real feel of it. You have to have somebody who, you know, who comes in and takes a look and just tells what needs to be told, as opposed to just telling the official history. It's one of the reasons when I was writing those books on Marvel, I enjoyed writing them, but there were just so many things I couldn't say, you know. And the whole time when I was writing Marvel, I got this reputation for writing, you know, there's rather weird letters pages. You know, I would write a lot of letters pages with the backstory of a thing, and people would talk about, you know, they were right, I guess, in a way. They were honest, and they sort of ripped, you know, showed what was going on behind the stage. But of course, the whole time I could only tell a certain amount of what was happening behind the stage, because you know, the other half, you know, would be something unfavorable to me, to Stan, to another editor or something. And you know, so you got part of the story, but you didn't get the whole story.
Now, I have a question for you.
I don't know if that answers the question either. You know, I just start off, and I don't know.
And I have a question for you.
But Operation Galactic Star was a nice project, but I never had much, you know, to do with it except writing my stories.
Now, one question I have for you is, you know, a lot of, you know, we've got WandaVision and stuff going on. You know, we've got a lot of things that you've had a hand in writing and creating that's being adapted to film or even television. I don't even know if you can really call streaming stuff.
That's weird, isn't it?
To me, they're definitely more cinematic in you know, the production, everything far better quality than television. But anyway, that's another conversation. But I mean, are you being reached out for cameos now for stuff you've done and things like that? Will we be seeing you know, Roy Thomas in some of these shows or films or anything?
No, we had to reach out to them for cameos. John should tell that.
Let me answer. This is one I
don't
can
say
answer.
Too much, John.
Yeah, I won't say too much.
You're gonna affect my royalties here.
I gotta say this right. Let's just say this: like, there are a lot of politics involved. So once Stan Lee went, they kind of consolidated on what they were going to do. So you're not really going to see a lot more of that happening because, like I said, there's a lot of politics involved. Did I say that good, Roy?
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I think it was a great idea to have other people. It's nice to have seen Jim Starlin, Chris Claremont, Glenn Weir, you know, to see them in there, and they deserved it. I was a little unhappy about the fact that, you know, they were doing stuff with my characters too, you know, the Vision and so forth, Ultron. They even had his name in a movie, and I wasn't getting any offers to, you know, to fly out to LA even at my own expense and be in one. And I was kind of unhappy. And John here took it upon himself to, you know, to approach a couple of people about it in a way that I would have been too shy and modest to do. And you know, and so forth. And I had to rein him back in eventually, you know, but eventually they finally came to me and they said, well, we can't.
To sum it up, I made it happen. I made it happen.
You didn't make it happen. There's no two ways about it. I'd just still be sitting there watching the TV and throwing things at it otherwise. And they gave me the choice then of being in, you know, one of the Netflix shows. And I just took the next one that was going, which is Daredevil, because although I hadn't had a hand in his creation as I had with Iron Fist and Luke Cage, I had written Daredevil for a couple of years, and it was the next thing coming up. So I grabbed that up, and I'm really pleased I got that cameo, because if I hadn't got that, who knows if I'd ever have another shot. But at least I got that one. I didn't get the movie, but I got in, you know, I got the TV cameo, and I had a good time at it. And the thing I'm always amazed at is that people would tell me they were watching the show and had no idea I was going to be in it and recognize me. That's the startling thing. Because here, do I look that great in Prison Orange? I mean, you know, everybody, right? Oh yeah, that's where he always belonged, behind bars.
Roy, how do you feel about?
But it was a great experience.
Yeah. How do you feel about the films? How do you feel about seeing, you know, so much of your work on the silver screen and then on the small screen? If you've seen WandaVision yet. I obviously seen Daredevil, but
I seen the first 3 episodes.
Yeah. So what do you think if we could start? Maybe
wait, Bill. Let me just answer this really. I just want to say one thing really quick. That, like, I know you're saying about his characters, but I gotta promote Roy here. He might
no,
but
Is that what you're here for?
That's what I'm here for. If you think about it, Roy is the only guy. There's a lot of people that have characters on DC, and there's a lot of people that have guys on Marvel. Roy is the guy that has them on both sides, on so many movies and on Marvel and DC. Just had to throw that out there. Check it out. All that stuff.
Yeah.
Mostly because Jeff Johns decided to loot them for the Stargirl show, but I'm happy about that and everything. But I really do. From the very beginning, starting with the X-Men movies, which I liked, but I mean the X-Men was always a little confusing for me, whether in the comics, the movies, or whatever. But I loved the idea that they were in there, and they were so much better than than other earlier Marvel attempts here and there, like on TV, like Captain America, even the Hulk, although the Hulk was okay. But then of course, when they started doing their own thing in 2008 with Iron Man, it just jumped up and got even better. The thing that was amazing me was I never really thought for the first few years of it, after X-Men, Spider-Man, and even Iron Man, it didn't occur to me for a while that any of my characters were likely. It didn't seem very likely that even if they did the Avengers, since they had Iron Man and Thor and Hulk, it didn't seem very likely they were going to need the Vision. That was sort of Josh Whelan's particular brainstorm. It wasn't for that in Ultron. But, but it's really interesting. I mostly like it. Sometimes, of course, the characters have very, very little to do with what I and the artists made up. Like Valkyrie has very little connection to the two different versions of the Valkyrie I made up, or the one that Steve Englehart added onto that when he took over the Invaders. There were like three different characters, and none of them were really quite are that much like the one in the movies. But that was the gem of it. And some characters, like the Vision, is fairly close to what I had in mind, and as Ultron was very close to what I had in mind.
What about Wolverine? That was fairly close to what Claremont did, right?
Yeah, but I never had that much input in Wolverine. Once I named it, and gave a few character things and so forth, I didn't have much to do with that. But but Iron Fist, well, I only did the first story, but I felt that they caught. I liked the show better than a lot of people. I thought they caught the spirit of it fairly well. Maybe the menace wasn't as good as it could be. I thought Luke Cage was pretty good, had the right feel. Actually, my favorite show of those, and Daredevil was really good. I probably like Jessica Jones as much as any because it was so offbeat, but I'd never read that comic. But I liked all of them. And, let's see, what was I wild about? One of the few. Well, the Daredevil show movie wasn't great, but it wasn't. I liked it better than critics did. I was wild about the Venom movie. I guess a year or two ago. Of the Marvel movies at DC is practically nothing. Like a couple of Batman movies and Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman, but at Marvel, I liked almost all of them in varying degrees, except for a non-official Marvel movie like Venom. I thought that sort of, because they couldn't have Spider-Man in it, it seemed like it fell between two stools, and so forth, and everything. But on the other hand, it was a big success, and it helped lead to Morbius if it ever comes out. So, I don't know, but I'm really in favor of it.
Yeah, there's something up with your mic. Did you guys move something over there? Do you hear that?
No. Nope. We haven't moved the thing. We haven't moved our.
It's just a fluctuation in their broadband bill.
Okay. Never mind.
Well, we're too polite to mention it, but sometimes you guys sound like Donald Duck coming over here too for a few seconds. You're like electronic Donald Duck.
Well,
but it's just there's something going on in the ether because we're in the dead zone.
Well, the great thing, Roy, John, is that Billy has no problem with not being too polite.
Thank you. Yes,
So
that's what you should say. That bastard Billy Tucci.
That I didn't get.
All right, I've got Niall, could we bring up John Frenz's question there?
Yep.
I really like that one.
Great one. That's a good question.
It says, hi, John and Roy. Roy, please tell the story on how Doctor Strange's Sanctorium got its address. One of my favorites.
Oh, well, I just needed an address. I had moved in very late 65, my friend Gary Friedrich and I, had moved into an address, 177A Bleecker Street, which no longer exactly address. It's now part of a 177 Bleecker, which existed then as a separate address. And we were living in, it was a little apartment over, second floor apartment over Bleecker Street. Bill Everett would stay with us 3 or 4 nights a week when he was in from Massachusetts, where he lived. And so he was drawing Doctor Strange while he was staying there. So one day, a few years, about 3 or 4 years later, long since moved out of that address, I was writing the story in which I decided to give Doctor Strange a secret identity. You know, the book was not selling quite well enough, so I was playing around, making a little more of a superhero. And I figured, part of that might be that he needed a secret identity. And if he's going to be Doctor Strange as the secret identity, he needs another guy. So I made up the name Steven Sanders. And it's as if that weird figure Eternity gave him a whole backstory, by his own cosmic powers. I figured, well, okay, once we get past that bit of nonsense, then it'll be just another superhero comic except with magic powers. But I needed a way to show that the world had changed. So I had to come up with an address, and I had a Western Union telegram or something that Doctor Strange had been sent to Doctor Strange before, addressed to Stephen Strange. And of course, doing that, I kind of needed an address, and rather than have it faded out or make up something, I just gave it 177A Bleecker Street, which is our real address. And then I changed it to, and beside that, I had that Steven Sanders living at 177A Bleecker Street. And all of a sudden, and I stuck, I think, that in 1 or 2 signs too. But the next thing you know, that became. And of course, there's no way that mansion could be there in that little tiny shotgun apartment that the 3 of us shared, which was about, 10 or so feet, 10, 15 feet wide at the street, and went back about 3 or 4 rooms. They call it a shotgun apartment because you shoot a shotgun and go straight through and come out the back, and not hit anything else in between.
Roy, tell them the 3 people that were living.
Well, I did, yeah. We were all comics people. Gary Friedrich, my friend, who wrote a lot of Marvel. Well, of course, Bill Everett. Yeah, I mentioned it. He was writing Doctor Strange, but it was just an address. Over the years, a lot of people say, "Oh, I know you got that from 221B Baker Street." I said, "No, I got it from where I live."
That's great.
That's great.
7A. It doesn't anymore, so now it's a mysterious lost place. It doesn't exist. It's like that mansion in upon itself. But what's nice is I think Marvel used it in 2 different movies. They showed that thing. They showed it in the Doctor Strange, and they showed it in, I think, one of the Avengers movies too. So it's become, it's taken on a life of its own. But all it really was a place where I lived and where we moved out because the landlord threatened to kill us.
So great, so great.
So I think we're maybe starting to run out of luck with your connection in the dead zone there. But I do want to ask you before the connection starts getting any worse. A lot of independent creators, young creators that are coming out into the world trying to get their characters known and their stories in, they see the comic industry changing, and some of them are kind of nervous of what they're seeing and how it's evolving or de-evolving. If you can, do you have any, what are your thoughts on the comic industry today? And are you hopeful, that, it's not going to change too much further? That's a bit of a loaded question.
No, I hope it survives. I don't like the idea of it all going to online or something like that. I'd write a couple of web comics, myself for the Edgar Rice Burroughs people, a couple of Tarzan and John Carter strips. But I want to see those, what they got to call Dick Giordano used to already calling them pamphlets. And I said, don't call them pamphlets, they're comic books. But I want to see those continue. And I, hope they will. But on the other hand, if they don't, the medium and the storytelling and the kind of interest could continue on the web. And it really wouldn't be a great change. For people like us that were print freaks, we would kind of miss it. But I don't know, somewhere along the line in the far distant past, there's somebody missing scrolls. I said, boy, there'll always be a market for scrolls. This whole new thing about having pages you turn, that's never going to take away from the fact that people are always going to want to have scrolls they can unroll and read. And as far as getting into the field, in some ways, I think people these days are a little luckier, potentially luckier. I was out there in the Midwest, if I hadn't accidentally just taken over this fanzine and sent things in, and of course, writing letters kind of helped, but a lot of people wrote letters. It was a combination of circumstances. But nowadays, if nothing else, anybody who can draw or write a little bit, of course, drawing is easier because it's more visual, can put it up on the web anyway, and somebody may see it, and so forth. If I had written something back in Missouri, I'd had to just toss it out the window or put it in a boat, and set it down the Mississippi or something, and hope somebody saw it. But nowadays, you can see it, and well, the chances are it'll be ignored. There's always that slight chance that lightning will strike, or that somebody will say, "Hey, maybe you could do something with me," or maybe this guy has this thing, or maybe it'll become a minor hit, and that'll lead to something bigger. And I think that the possibilities because of the web are they're kind of limitless and so forth. I hope the comic books continue because that's what I like. But I'm 80 years old. I'm not really buying comics anymore. I'm not going to support that market. So somebody else is going to have to decide what the market's going to be. Is network television going to survive? When people are carrying on podcasts, streaming, and everything else, or movies going to survive? The Gershwin said, the radios, the movies that we know may just be passing fancies. He said that almost 100 years ago, and they hadn't passed yet, but that doesn't mean they still won't.
Now, wow, you just got me with that song. It's pretty cool. So going back, I mean, this has been fantastic. I mean, we've had you on now. Are we over an hour yet?
Yeah, we've been on over an hour. So I am curious, how Roy and John got together with this great partnership. I think, that's why I was watching it. I was afraid that we would time out with their broadband
connection.
Yeah,
we should attempt this again, even if we had to do an in-person interview at a future convention. When we have conventions again, because that's an interesting story how they got together. And John,
we got them back.
We have them back.
Excellent. Okay,
lost it for a
there we
second
go.
here.
Oh, their connection's way better too.
My technical wizard here got you back.
Yeah,
There you go.
A lot better.
A lot better.
Niall, ask that question because that's a really great question. It's a good one for us to wrap up.
Yeah, I would love to. How John and
What's
yourself got connected here. I've seen. I've been friends with John on Facebook for a while, and it looks like you two have a great connection. Working together and everything. How did you guys develop your partnership? As John is your manager.
Me and this guy?
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah,
I can define it best. I can define it best. Roy said to me, "I just showed up and I never left," and he's right.
Well, he was just this character I kept running into at conventions and everything, and he'd say, "You want to see my old Spider-Man suits?" And I'd say, "We're not really that way." But anyway, it's okay if we were, but we're not. But anyway, and he was just this guy he had the Ben Cooper suits, and all this, and he showed me, and I've got about 35 seconds of interest in that, and so forth, and because got 35 seconds of interest in everything, but then and John he was a dealer, he was and so forth, and the next thing I don't know, somehow or other he found out, he suddenly started coming up with ideas for ways we could do things a little differently, because as John always says, down here in South Carolina, which of course I moved to get away from places like Los Angeles and New York, much as I like them. I basically, as you always say, living off the grid. Nobody was gonna know that I had co-created Wolverine or Luke Cage or any of that stuff. Especially if I didn't, have my name plastered over the thing as writer. Nobody was going to know this because I wasn't out there promoting myself. I'd go to an occasional convention if somebody asked me. He says, we should make people aware of this and so forth. And I said, well, go for it. And it's sort of worked out. It's made it. It's been profitable. It's been entertaining. It's been interesting. It's not just about the money. Only 90% about the money. Come on, John. Let's be fair here. It's but it's made life a little more interesting. And if we could all just get to the point where we could all get in the same room again sometime, I think things would even get better.
How are you guys doing with that? With the conventions are down, you can't do the meet and greets. How has that been for you guys this year?
What it is now, And what it is now, sorry about that, is that we do a lot of private signings because I get a lot of offers for Roy, like for conventions all over, but we don't know if it's set in stone yet, that if they can actually have it on that date. Everything is very tentatively scheduled. But right now we did a big in-house signing at CGC and they want us back. I guess we did such a phenomenal job that they want us back. So we'll probably be going there later this year. But
nearly a couple of thousand comments that went.
Well, we did.
Yeah.
They did pretty good.
And some of the worst drawings we've ever seen in life. He sells me as an artist, and I am not an artist.
I'll sell you at it all, whatever it is. I'll just keep selling you. But that's what we've been doing, just like the in-house signings and stuff. But like I said, as hopefully as conventions open up, we'll be there. With Billy. We'll be there with Billy Tucci.
Yeah, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Tucci's going to come in, and we can all sit in the car together. I'll be with two rock stars here, two guys that were in rock and roll bands.
Yeah. Well, Gary Friedrich and I did a little of that in high school. I did an Elvis imitation. I was one of the early Elvis imitators. This was like January or so of '58. He'd been around a couple of years by then, but there weren't many people, imitate professionally. But I came up and did this thing in a high school thing, and then that led to people.
Yep.
Oh. Probably now the
Wait,
Elvis
was he the official first Elvis impersonator?
I don't think he was the first, but he's
They cut it off. Nope, the NSA cut us off.
They're back.
The NSA cut us off because he was about to expose he was the first Elvis
We're back.
impersonator.
Should I say anything or give up?
We'll try to wrap
not
it with
the first
that.
by a long shot. Stan Freberg had already done a record.
Look at that. And then John was
but
a fan too.
and Gary Friedrich was a drummer.
Rock star.
I believe that in the hundreds of episodes that we have done on Pop XP, that is the first mention of Stan Freberg, and it should not be the last.
No, it should not. Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep. Well, this was great.
Hey, guys.
We're going to lose him again. So
Just so you know, it's getting
Yeah. Well, we just want to thank you guys for coming on. Yeah, we're losing them. I just want to, if they can, I'm sure they'll watch. We can obviously catch up with them after, but definitely want a big thanks to Roy and John for coming on.
One last hurrah. Here we go.
Let's see if we can get them in here.
Anyway, just want to tell you how much fun it's been, and sorry for the technical difficulties, but consider we're shooting here from the negative zone. I think that we've probably done pretty well.
But yeah, so it's probably going to start getting worse too, because I don't know if it started raining here and stuff, but we're going to have to. And Roy's got to go back to his the vampire tomb, right?
Yeah, right.
The coffin and stuff.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us to be on here. It's been a lot of fun. We hope we see you in person one of these days.
Absolutely, and maybe we'll have a nice
Absolutely.
atmosphere. Maybe we'll have a few drinks. We'll do it in a corner of a bar or something. We'll sit. And and then we'll just have a real free, open discussion, and do it live all across the fruited plain.
There you go.
All right. Well, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Cimino, this was great. This is one of our best shows. This was so much fun. We could talk to you guys for hours. But
this was one of the best. What kind of show have you got?
Hey, man, this is as good as it gets.
What kind of show have you got there? If this is one of the best.
All right, one of the best.
Well, no, it's been fun. I'm sorry we had the technical difficulties, but that's the way it is.
That's the way
Well,
it
thank you guys so
Thanks,
much
guys.
for coming on.
All right.
You guys have a good one.
you.
Stay safe out there.
Well,
Boy, how
That
great.
was what a great show. That was
Really
fantastic.
phenomenal. Can you? Seriously, one of the things that's so great about this industry is that we are blessed periodically to have elder statesmen who are still active and influencing not only influencing younger creators, but also passing on the history. Roy is in a really unique perspective in that, having started as a fan and done fanzines, and now that we're many years into his revival of Alter Ego at Tomorrow's Publishing, the history that he's recording and disseminating they're just so vital, because whether you're a country, a company, a person, or an industry, you're lost if you don't know your history.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm surprised though. One thing is that when he went on that school trip to New York City and being a comics fan, that he didn't try to go to the Marvel or DC offices.
Yeah.
Well,
maybe who knows? Maybe that wasn't an interest at the time. You never know.
He said pretty specifically he wasn't talking about breaking in at that point.
Yeah.
He was not.
He was on the path for it to be a teacher. But one thing we didn't get to touch on, and we'll wrap up in just a moment here, was that for those that don't know, I mean, he was one of he saw Stan just a couple days before he passed.
Yeah, Stan died the next day, I believe.
And they really had a good long-term relationship. And listen, I think Roy was very candid when he said that he didn't think like Stan, but the fact is he could write like him. Listen, nobody, including when you're replacing yourself, it's not a seamless transition. But Roy, from Stan as main writer to Roy as main writer, is as seamless as I've ever seen in comics. It felt like the House of Ideas thing was continuing.
Yes.
So, and I think if you look at, and I think John's point was really well taken, that he created characters in both universes that have stood the test of time. And, I love the business side of why he created Invaders, so he could do something nobody else would be messing with him. But I happen to just love the Invaders too.
Yeah.
So there's so much more, and we could have done a whole show on just the first 5 or 6 issues of What If.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
So
and for those, if you're ever curious, back in the day, there was actually an interview, and Stan Lee interviewed Roy. I mean, that's
great.
Roy.
Wow,
Right there on YouTube.
I knew about this, and I should have figured it was accessible somewhere, but I didn't know it was.
That's 1976.
Yeah, he looks like a Beach Boy.
Yeah. And so I mean, you guys can go on YouTube and check it out. Just type in Stan Lee interviews Roy Thomas. Yeah, look at those pants. Look at those boots. Look at those boots Stan had on.
Niall, did you catch that little reference there?
Oh no, I was talking. Sorry.
You said that fans wanted to see this, they could go on YouTube. I said, shame we can't.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah. Oh, why? Because that's right. We're in jail. We're in jail.
The Was Not Was song. Hello, Dad. I'm in jail.
Oh.
At any rate, I think on that we should wrap.
Absolutely.
Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. This is, for anyone out there in Facebook land that watched us live, thanks for joining us. Thanks for the questions from that were submitted earlier today through Twitter, and for those that corresponded with us in the chat on Facebook. It's a shame we didn't have our big YouTube audience with us tonight watching. We tried to rally them over. For those that don't know, we can't live stream on YouTube till April 13th. Thank you, Warner Brothers. But either way, this will be uploaded to YouTube in probably about a half hour. And everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. JC, thanks for joining us tonight. Billy, as always, it's been a pleasure.
Can I take a moment for a plug?
Take a moment for a plug.
Yeah, I want to plug some stuff too.
Yeah,
is this something that we will be also delving in deeper tomorrow night?
I believe you are correct, sir. Tomorrow, both on Indiegogo and on Kickstarter, following up on Mr. Tucci's no fan left behind policy.
Yeah, see,
I will be launching second Wednesday my first novel.
Excellent.
It has a incredible smoldering Joe Jusko cover.
Yes,
like literally why I'm the first person to get Jusko to do a crime cover on a book is beyond me, but I'll sure take the credit for it.
Yes, you will.
And it defies the imagination. If you look at that cover, like how am I the first guy to get him?
Gorgeous.
And we're offering 2 editions. One will be the standard edition, which is I hope a really good book. I've decided to become the Jessica Fletcher of my adopted hometown of Hearst, Texas, where the murder rate is something like 3/4 of a person a year. Well, I'm going to do what I can do to skyrocket that. And the deluxe limited edition, which has basically the same contents, but it also will have spot illustrations of some of the key characters. by people like Mr. Billy Tucci.
Nice.
And I'm really happy to say, former Red Sonja artist who hasn't been in comics for a while, Mary Wilshire, did a piece. And John K. Snyder III is doing a piece.
Oh, wow.
And my pal Joe James and Chris Evenhughes, who does Wynonna Earp, and Mark Wheatley and Ed Cato, and we're just smoking along with these things.
Oh, you got Ed to do? Oh, that's
good.
cool.
I did.
Oh, that's
going to be
great.
a fun conversation tomorrow night, JC.
I look forward to talking about it.
Adapting a lot of the comic book crowdfunding techniques to a novel.
Yeah, and basically, you know, we were Gemstone's going to release in the mass market. Gemstone's going to release the standard edition of the book. So we're gonna come in and we'll talk about this more tomorrow night. But the people will get an additional short story, the first solo story of one of the two characters, Donovan Bay's partner, Michelle Benson. And matter of fact, if we get to a stretch goal, we've already recorded an audio book of that short story, and it's fantastic.
Oh, I can't wait! Thank you for sending it to me. That's what I'm having tomorrow with my tea.
So we've got all sorts of other stuff there that we want to do. But what I really wanted to do was I so loved Darwin Cook's hardcover prose book that he did, where he did spot illustrations of the first Parker book, the Richard Stark Parker book, the first one. And it was supposed to be a series of them, the early ones that had never had hardcovers, but they had these great Darwin spot illustrations in them. And I really wanted to do something like that with this book. And I figured, you know, I'm a comic book guy, and, you know, my Overstreet position, I sort of know everybody. And why not get some of my friends? You know, it's like I said earlier to somebody that it's the first time I've ever felt like Ringo, because I get by with a little help from my friends. You know, it really is. Yeah. It is a situation where I pick up the phone, I call somebody, shoot them a text, and like, yeah, sure, I'm in, and it's phenomenal. And then we'll see if it works. I'd love to do more of these stories, and I think it's going to be. I'm looking forward to talking with you about it tomorrow night, because quite frankly, it's a new avenue for me. I've done 40 plus nonfiction books, but this is my first novel.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. This should be fun. It'll be fun. The conversation.
Well, you really knocked it out of the park, Old Bean. It does not feel like a freshman effort for a novel at all.
Thank you very much. And
you missed them. You missed them.
Talk about your frag-a-booms.
Frag-a-boom in the hissy. That's
all right, gentlemen. I hope you guys
have Billy wanted to plug something.
We're not going. I'm staying on. So I got something. Whoa!
Look at that, 32.
Kickstarter campaign. We have less than 4 days to go. So, and then the campaign ends. Once Kickstarter ends, it ends. I've got some exciting news. What are they called? Rough cut editions. They go to press this Friday. The following Friday, the She Blue Line editions go to press. And the following Friday after that, all the color editions go to press. We're actually going to try to get the color editions out by Wednesday.
Speaking as your editor, thanks.
What?
I said, speaking as your editor, thanks.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're going to get you'll get your lettered balloons, the final lettered balloons, I guess, Wednesday.
Niall, I don't know if Billy told you this, but the last time he sent me lettered balloons, he actually sent them by FedEx, and I had to put them on the comic.
I thought you were going to say actually sent you balloons.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Wouldn't be prudent.
And tell the milkman no more cheese.
There you go. Well, this was so great, wasn't it?
It was fantastic.
Awesome show. He is a beast mode, man.
Yeah. Hey, Dan, as you know, we're kind of shut down on YouTube from streaming live, but I'll have this uploaded live on the YouTube channel, and you can I believe you could just actually scroll back right on this video, or it'll just process on the Pop XP Facebook fan page there. If you want to check it out.
Yeah, it'll be in both places.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. Fantastic.
Great show, guys.
Great show. And yeah, fantastic. Guys, keep an eye out. We'll have a lot more content that's being recorded and uploaded all week long. We're trying to push about 1 to 2 videos a day being uploaded to the channel on many different topics in different series that we've planned for 2021. So I hope you're all enjoying them. A bunch of different things are coming along nicely, and we will see you all next time.
There you go.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
Well done.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Pop XP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the Pop XP and over on Instagram at the Pop XP. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you soon.